Every currency has an expiration date. Eventually, the central bank exhausts the potential of the currency, just as it continues to do all throughout history. There's no way they could back down from this policy, as it is pervasive. Just check out the hundreds of examples there have been, all ending in the same fate. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's look at this graphic right away. What we can see here is $100. What is the value of that? You see the numbers 100, but what does that mean? Well, looking at this chart, you can see based on the US, different states, you'll see what that value is. Now, the darker the color, the more value you get for your money. And obviously, the more yellow the color, then it is the least value. So you can see that California, for example, you have $88. And an area like, for example, Kentucky, you get $113. So your money goes a lot further in Kentucky than it does in California. And that's essentially what this graphic is trying to show you. It's an interesting way to look at things because we're always looking at the nominal values, and that is really not fair to assess anything in its nominal value. It needs to be inflation adjusted. It needs to be in relation to real goods. And that's the argument I made in my first book where I talk about that. What does $100 buy you? Back in 1900, I'm sure you could have got a car for $100. Then we move on to maybe a motorcycle in the 1950s. And now today, you're lucky to get a bus pass with $100. So that same 100 no longer buys you what it did in the past. And that is because of central banking. That is the purpose of central banking, in fact. So everyone's friends here at the rating agencies have been known to commit crimes when they knowingly rate something that should be the worst of the worst, and they give it a good rating. They give it a go ahead, the little check mark. S&P stress test, I love these, shows subprime ABS resilience. The worst of the worst, once again, being given the green light. While rising losses have caused some concern in the industry, S&P Global Ratings found that subprime auto loans, okay, check this out, subprime auto loans bundled in securitizations are still well positioned to weather an economic downturn. So they weren't able to do so the first time around, and somehow, they're able to do it this time. This is why I continuously call this the financial crisis part 2. That's what we are into, the same mistakes being made over and over again. It goes into more details about it, but you get the point. The rating agencies are there for nothing more than propaganda. We can't trust what they say or do because when you can rate the lowest quality debt and garbage that they can put out there as a AAA investment, you know that they are fraudulent and they are irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. Looking at this, Bitcoin and gold had a bit of a divergence here. Quite interesting because they've been tracking each other now for several days, and you can see at this moment quite a divergence. Anyway, gold had dipped below 1300 and Bitcoin had risen up around 4200 almost, and at the time of this video it's approximately at that number. It's just interesting to see. I'm not going to make any points about this. I'll move on. Okay, then look at Bitcoin. This is what I find interesting, and it brings me back to the point I was making earlier. In Zimbabwe, a country that only a few years ago experienced one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in history, they're using Bitcoin there. Not a large percentage of the people, but it is growing. Because of everything that's happening there, they're still in turmoil. And people are deciding that they want to use Bitcoin as a means of transaction. The use of Bitcoin in Zimbabwe has grown exponentially as the government has begun to stop all credit card payments and restricted the flow of cash into and out of the country. People wishing to make payments for vehicles have been forced to use Bitcoin, and car lenders are happy to accept. Now, the price of Bitcoin, US dollar wise, you can see it's around 4,000. But in all of the chaos, the price of Bitcoin on the local exchange has soared to $7,200. The premium reflects a frantic desire to find ways to transact within an economy where the government controls have made traditional means impossible. This is why we need alternative means of transaction. That's why I like something like this. Maybe Bitcoin isn't the be-all, end-all. I don't know what's going to be developed over the years, but I know that using the fraudulent banker systems are not good as a means of trusting. I would also say that the same thing applies to gold and silver, where we are looking at this at, on these financial markets. I have a bar of gold, and today it is worth $1,300 per ounce, and that is what it is. I can go anywhere in the world and get $1,300 per ounce. Well, that's not really the way it works. I mean, that might be the spot price, but that's not the way it works. You might get a hell of a lot more, or you could get less. But looking at, for example, numismatic coins, where some people, they know what they're doing, they know how to judge it, and they can make a very, very exciting premium on some of these coins. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the face value is what we're going to take it. We're going to look at it in a different way where it could be higher, could be lower. You have to use your best judgment. That's what I'll say. But I just wanted to mention the fact that at the time you want to sell or want to buy, it may not be what you had hoped. For example, if somebody has to get some Bitcoin right now, they're paying nearly double the amount in Zimbabwe. So that's the way I see it. There obviously might be other ways to bring the money in, but just wanted to mention that. I think it's very interesting that countries are turning to that when they have problems. They're just using Bitcoin. They're doing so in Venezuela. They're doing so in other places as well. I've been covering that here. 44% of Puerto Ricans lack clean drinking water. Quite a sad story. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was we need to be prepared. And it's not just your stocks and your 401k, that's something that, insignificant, pales in comparison to clean drinking water. Now, for most people who live in the West, they may think that everything is just fine. Don't need to worry about this. It's only those developing nations. But it's really something that I would watch out for. If you had your own water catchment system, if you had your own well, if you had your own spring nearby, maybe you'd be fine. Because you can always attain more water. But what happens when you don't have fresh water? Well, then you have to go to the government, who's probably giving out bottles of water, who are probably giving instructions on what to do with the water supply and everything else. So you go there, and now you are endangering yourself because you're going around the mobs who are already upset and everything else. You don't want to have that happen. You want to be prepared. So one of the most important things is to have a water filtration system. I recommend the Berkey. It's the one I've been using for several years. And the reason I like it, in part, to obviously how good it is the fact that it doesn't require power. So I think that is very important. Having your own water supply, having the ability to catch your own water is very key. And that's all. I'll move on. Mystery surrounds metal towers popping up in tunnels and bridges. it might be a little difficult to see. I'll bring out the highlighter here. It's this large area at the bottom and then sort of this antenna-like thing coming out of the top. Weird. And this is for the homeland, obviously. What they're doing with it, I don't know. I think it's more of what we had seen before: cameras, microphones, recording devices there to make sure you're safe. Just remember to say cheese when the camera hits the flash. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it pushes these videos higher up into the YouTube search rankings. So I do appreciate that when you do so. And if you hate this video, if you hate my face, then give me a thumbs down. I enjoy that too. Last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know you'll find my books, The Money GPS and my new release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. The first book is about the 4 asset classes, foundation, history. And the new book takes on familiar concepts, but I also get into earning your income, reducing your debt, and so on. So you can check those out at Amazon. The links are in the description below. Take care. If you're still here, I just wanted to mention something. You know, if you watched my previous video where I talk about getting free land, I was a little bit caught off guard, actually, by some of the responses. Most of the responses, of course, are positive, but some of them were not so positive. And a lot of people were upset that I didn't tell them how to get not only the land for free, but the house on the land for free as well. And probably I shouldn't even bother talking about this, but what I'm trying to do here is to give the maximum amount of information in the shortest period of time. I'm also trying to give people actual practical tips that I don't see anywhere else. Look, if you want stock tips, there are a million websites that will tell you which stocks to pick. I don't do that. That's not what I do. I am in a totally different paradigm than what those people are. And I don't judge anybody for what they do. If they want that, absolutely, by all means. That's not what I do. I just look at it like we have daily expenses. We have to pay for some sort of shelter, food, water, the basics. Anything else is all on top. It's the cherry on top, the icing on the cake. But we need those 3 things. So why not get those sorted out, and then we will be able to fend off any sort of crisis that occurs. If our stock portfolio, if you want to own stocks, that's totally fine. But what if those stock values plummeted significantly? Is that going to hurt you? Why? Ask yourself why. Well, then I wouldn't be able to take that money out and then buy my first home, or my next home, or my investment property, or that boat I wanted, or whatever. You know, we have to think about it as it's important to look at our daily expenses. That's the most important thing. Our daily expenses. Look, if you want to book a trip to Bora Bora, you can do so. But that's not essential. Some people might think it is, but it's not essential. And that's really what I'm trying to look at. I don't want to go into it anymore. I was a little disappointed just for some of the comments. And that's all. Thank you.